President Trump signing the Republican tax bill and celebrating the landmark legislation.
So this is the bill right here, and we're very proud of it. It's going to be a tremendous thing for the American people. It's going to be fantastic for the economy.
Not everybody agrees, but either way, it is now the law of the land. Plus, the politics of the president. Word of a major meeting at the White House with insiders showing concern about the coming year's midterm elections and how things are running at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So, changes ahead and headed somewhere for Christmas. In some parts, the weather outside's pretty frightful, with travel anything but delightful. So, can you avoid frustration in the forecast? That's all ahead in this hour of Shepard Smith reporting. I'm Rick Leventhal in for Shepard Smith. The Republican tax bill is now the law of the land. President Trump signing the measure today, his first major legislative victory as president. It triggers the most sweeping changes to the tax code in decades. At a signing ceremony in the Oval Office, the president called the Republican bill tremendous.
Everything in here is really tremendous things for businesses, for people, for the middle class, for workers. And I consider this very much a bill for the middle class and a bill for jobs. And jobs are produced through companies and corporations, and you see that happening. Corporations are literally going wild over this.
But Democrats call the bill a scam and one of the worst pieces of legislation in history. They say it favors the rich and big corporations. Democrats also predicting the new tax law will come back to haunt Republicans in the 2018 midterms. The president today also signing a temporary spending bill before heading to his Florida resort for Christmas break. The measure keeps the government from shutting down at midnight tonight. The bill cleared the House and Senate despite opposition from some Democrats. They demanded protection for so-called dreamers, the hundreds of thousands of immigrants whose parents brought them to the U.S. without documents. Republican leaders say they plan to work on that next year. The president says he'd like to tackle infrastructure next. He says it will be easy, and he hopes to work with Democrats. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts live on the North Lawn. John?
Rick, good afternoon to you. The president now in West Palm, well, he was in Palm Beach now. He touched down in West Palm Beach a short time ago. Let's show you some of those pictures. The president giving a big fist pump as he was walking across the tarmac there from Air Force One over to greet some well-wishers. He signed autographs for about 25 minutes. Difficult to overstate the scope of the victory for President Trump. This was the central issue in his campaign. This was the one really that was for all the marbles this year. Had he not gotten this through, Democrats probably would have pounded him for failing to make good on one of his central campaign issues, the central campaign issue. But the president this morning saying a promise made is a promise kept. He got the two big things that he was looking for, not the reduction in the corporate tax rate that he really wanted. He wanted to get it down to 15% from 35. He got it down to 21%. And the president says lots of tax relief for middle-class Americans. Listen here.
As you know, $3.2 trillion in tax cuts for American families, including the doubling of the standard deduction and the doubling of the child tax credit. The typical family of four earning $75,000, we see an income tax cut of more than $2,000. Many much higher than that, slashing their tax bill in half.
And the announcement today that a couple of more companies are joining the ones that were announced yesterday and giving Christmas bonuses and other perks to some of their employees. Sinclair and PNC now joining Boeing, AT&T, Comcast, Wells Fargo, and First Third Bank. Sinclair PNC saying that approximately 55,000 people will be receiving a $1,000 bonus just in time for Christmas. Rick?
Not bad. Some of the president's advisors holding a meeting about the 2018 midterm elections. What do you know about that, John?
Yeah, and this meeting took place right after the president had that big event on Wednesday with Republican members of Congress in the South Portico to celebrate the passage of tax reform. I mean, the afterglow was not long-lived because all of these people got together, and it was John Kelly, the president's chief of staff, Kellyanne Conway, his senior advisor, communications director Hope Hicks, Bill Stepien, who's the political director, Corey Lewandowski, and Brad Parscale, who was the digital director during the Trump campaign, to talk about the midterm elections in 2018 and just how badly Republicans could get hurt in those elections. When you look at what happened in both Virginia and Alabama this year, we are told that at one point, Corey Lewandowski, the president's former campaign manager, got into a heated debate by saying that the president's political shop here at the White House is not doing enough to back him up and to make plans for the 2018 election. And as well, Lewandowski expressed some dismay that the Republican National Committee was not doing enough. I did some digging around today and found that some folks here at the White House are saying the same sort of thing, that there is a disconnect between the White House communications shop and the RNC communications shop, that when the White House gets into some knife fights, they're not getting enough air cover from the RNC. So I would imagine, Rick, going into 2018, we're going to see some changes in terms of the political operation, if not in personnel, at least in the way it operates, and maybe a better connection between the White House and what should be the White House's political arm, the RNC. Right?
And I'm sure many more meetings on that topic, John. The president today also talking about his 2018 agenda.
And you mentioned it at the top. First on the list is going to be infrastructure reform. Let's put it up on the screen so you can take a look at what the president's going after. Rebuilding infrastructure will be his first order of business. He also wants to reform legal immigration to a greater degree than he has, and he also wants to tackle welfare reform. This is why the president wants to tackle infrastructure first. It's because he believes he might get some bipartisan buy-in. Listen to what the president said a short time ago in the Oval Office.
Infrastructure is by far the easiest. People want it, Republicans and Democrats. We're going to have tremendous Democrat support on infrastructure, as you know. I could have started with infrastructure. I actually wanted to save the easy one for the one down the road. So we'll be having that done pretty quickly.
But when it comes to the other two issues, immigration reform and welfare reform, it could make Obamacare repeal and replacement and tax reform look easy in comparison. The president and Democrats are polar opposites on a lot of issues when it comes to immigration reform, welfare reform as well. Immigration reform, the president needs to get Democrats on board. He needs 60 votes in the Senate to get that through. Welfare reform could be done through reconciliation, which requires a simple majority. That's what Bill Clinton did in 1996. And also, don't forget, Rick, the president wants to do something about the Dreamers, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, and he is at odds with Democrats over how to get that done as well. So he better rest up over Christmas, because he's got some tough hauling ahead.
John, you better rest up, too.
I will, I promise. Thank you.
Let's bring in Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace now. Chris, the president nearly euphoric today, talking about the tax bill, calling it tremendous and incredible. He seemed very proud. Is that well-deserved praise that he's giving to the bill?
Well, look, it's a big accomplishment for a president who didn't have many accomplishments in terms of bills being passed through Congress, controversial big bills. And of course, this is after the failure on Obamacare repeal and replace. So, yeah, it is a big deal. It is a historically big tax cut and a dramatic reform of the tax system, especially on the corporate side more than the individual side. The political impact, I think, is still to be determined. You talked at the beginning, Rick, about the fact that there are two very different scenarios that are playing out, or two very different arguments. Republicans are saying this is going to jet fuel the economy. That's going to turn into higher wages and more jobs. Yeah. We'll see. As you point out, Democrats say that this is a bailout for the rich and for big businesses. The interesting thing, though, is that I don't think the narratives are going to matter much, because in the end, people are going to see for themselves between now and early November, when the midterm elections take place, do they feel it in their paycheck each week? Do they feel it in terms of wages that are going higher and more jobs being created or not? So my guess is that this is a real world experience where people will see whether or not it changes their lives for the better, and that'll dramatically affect the long-term reviews for this tax bill.
Well, and Chris, the Wall Street Journal today reporting that more than 80% of Americans will actually pay less taxes next year.
Yeah, for a lot of people, it's a very small amount. Not to say, obviously, everybody would like more money, but for a lot of folks, it may be $50 or $75 extra a week, which isn't going to make a dramatic difference in their lives. The real key to this, it seems to me, is whether it does jumpstart the economy. The corporate taxes, that's the major change here. And if we see a tremendous increase in growth, and if that translates not into higher dividends or stock buybacks that help shareholders, but in terms of more jobs, more investment, higher wages, because there is more demand for a fairly stable and full employment workforce, then that's going to have a dramatic effect on people's lives and will have a dramatic effect on the political fortunes of tax reform. But we're going to have to wait and see.
And that was the president's argument today. He said it would bring trillions of dollars back to the U.S. because of cuts in corporate tax and added incentives.
Yeah, that's his argument. There are a lot of economic experts who will say when you've got an economy that is growing at almost full capacity, almost full employment, that in fact what you might see is a rise in interest rates. Again, we don't know, but this is what we're going to see.
Chris,
there's a counter argument that that is going to overheat the economy. You might see a rise in interest rates, perhaps a rise in inflation, that there could be, some unintended consequences of this. And of course, also, will the corporations put the money into dividends and, as I mentioned, and stock buybacks, which are good for shareholders, or will they put it into new investment and new employment opportunities for their workers?
He also said the bill marked the end of Obamacare. Is that accurate?
No. It isn't. And the president kind of backed down today from what he said on Wednesday when he said the repeal of the individual mandate means the repeal of Obamacare. It doesn't. And in fact, there was some very interesting news from the Department of Health and Human Services yesterday that despite really no effort by the Trump administration to publicize it, that 8.8 million people re-enrolled for Obamacare in this last sign-up period. That's only 400,000 fewer than the last year when Obama was in office. So Obamacare is still along. Now, this may mean higher premiums, and it may mean some markets where insurance companies pull out because they can't make profits. But in terms of pre-existing conditions, in terms of expanded Medicaid, in terms of subsidies for people who want health insurance, in terms of almost 9 million people re-enrolling, Obamacare, it may not be quite alive and well, but it sure is breathing.
Chris, John Roberts was reporting about that closed-door meeting on 2018. How worried are the Republicans about the midterm elections?
Oh, very. I mean, look at what happened in the Virginia governor's race, where you had what was supposed to be a very close race and ended up being a Democratic blowout. Look at what happened in Alabama, which was supposed to be a reliably red state, and you had the Democrat upsetting Roy Moore. Now, there's some special circumstances with Moore, but you see a very energized Democratic voter base, especially among suburban women, young people, minorities. This president, despite his accomplishments this week, with historically low favorability ratings for this early in a presidency, the Senate's going to be tough because there are so many more seats. The Democrats are defending 24, the Republicans only 8. But in the House, where the Republicans have a 24-seat majority, there's talk, I'm reading today, about maybe 40 seats swinging to Democrats. Look, we're an eternity away. It's 11 months away. But this is going to be a tough election for Republicans. And obviously, any effort of the president to pass his agenda would really be put in jeopardy were Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats to take back control of the House.
Well, Chris, we appreciate your insight. We know you have a big show this weekend on Fox News Sunday. On Christmas Eve morning, Chris talks with Mark Short, the White House Legislative Affairs Director, about the showdowns ahead over immigration and health care and national security. Also, Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland, the top Democrat on the Foreign Relations Committee, about the possible fallout from the UN vote against President Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel. That's this Sunday on your local Fox station. Check the TV listings for the time in your area. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell giving us a preview of what's on tap for next year. He's also talking about the president's tweeting. And McConnell took a swipe at the former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon over the GOP's historic defeat in that Alabama Senate race. That's coming up next. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell holding a news conference before heading home for the holidays. Among the topics, his relationship with President Trump. The senator says he wasn't a fan of President Trump's tweeting until this week. Of course, it helps that the president was singing his praises over the Republican tax plan and not criticizing him for a lack of legislation. Peter Ducey with more, live on Capitol Hill. Peter, what else did McConnell say about working with President Trump?
Rick, the Senate Majority Leader said that his good working relationship with the president that has clearly improved since Inauguration Day is a big part of the reason that the country has started to shift right of center. And McConnell announced today that he and the president and the House Speaker Paul Ryan plan to get together at the White House at the start of 2018 to figure out what else they can do to keep some of this momentum that they think they have now from tax reform going into the new year. There were a lot of questions today about DACA as well, and McConnell says that we should expect to see the beginnings of some sort of clarity about what the administration and what Congress wants to do about people who came to this country illegally as children next month.
We have a commitment on a bipartisan basis to address the DACA issue, and there's a working group with composed of people of widely diverse views on immigration. And I've said to them if they can come up with an agreement that the administration is comfortable with, and this includes Senator Durbin, who's in the group, and people on our side who have very different points of view about it, we'll devote floor time to that in January as well.
And McConnell told me he doesn't think there's an emergency reason to get DACA done in January. He says the administration gave them till March. He suggested that that may be when the Senate finally takes it up. But that may not be satisfactory to Democratic leaders who appear to be positioning themselves to use a fight over DACA as leverage over Republicans the next time that they have to talk about a budget. And that's not March, that's the middle of January.
They kick the can down for the omnibus into January. It's this year extended. That's what it is. It's the process.
So Pelosi and Schumer keeping their DACA cards close to the vest, but again, it does appear that they plan to bring this up in a big way shortly after they return in the beginning of January. Rick.
And Peter, I understand Senator McConnell also talked about the midterms and President Trump's former chief strategist, Steve Bannon.
Right. Steve Bannon has basically declared war, political war, on Mitch McConnell. And now McConnell is taking a shot back, saying that he does not think the Alabama special election result, where Bannon came in, he backed Roy Moore in a red state, and then Moore lost, reflects very well on the former chief strategist.
The political genius on display, throwing away a seat in the reddest state in America, is hard to ignore.
But this afternoon, I have been speaking to a source close to Steve Bannon, and Bannon allies believe that McConnell is losing control of the GOP conference. And there is no indication that Bannon plans to slow down his insurgency in the 2018 midterms. The plan, as of right now, is for them to challenge every sitting Republican senator who is up for re-election, with the exception of Ted Cruz and now Orrin Hatch. Rick.
Peter Ducey on Capitol Hill. Peter, thanks very much. So winter storms could bring a white Christmas to parts of the country. We'll have your holiday forecast coming up. Plus, analysts say it's the busiest day of the year for air travel, and the security lines are no joke. Here's a look at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. We'll have a live report from one of the busiest airports in the entire United States of America coming up next. This is the busiest U.S. air travel day of the year, according to Hopper, an airfare information app. It reports that for the first time ever, more than 3 million passengers are set to fly on this very day. And this didn't help. The fire alarm went off at Dallas Love Field Airport this morning, forcing thousands of people to evacuate. Officials say an air conditioning unit overheated and smoke set off that alarm. Here's what it looked like when everybody tried to get back into the airport. People said it took more than an hour and a half to get through security. Hillary Vaughn is live at Los Angeles International Airport. Hillary, where there are no fire alarms going off, I hope?
No fire alarms here, Rick, but the reason why it took those passengers in Dallas to get through security for an hour and a half is because the TSA says they have tighter restrictions in place to deal with the holiday travel rush. Now travelers need to remove any electronics bigger than a cell phone from their bags and put them each in separate bins, which means it takes a lot longer to get through security. Now, AAA estimates more than 107 million people will travel this weekend. That's the highest on record ever. So to deal with the holiday rush, the TSA is also utilizing more resources than last year. They have 55 more K9 teams this Christmas travel season on the lookout, sniffing around for any explosive devices, including this team here, Officer Arales and his dog Kira. But I talked with a sergeant with the LAPD today who says they're monitoring terror threats constantly.
We also do have officers that are in plain clothes, which means you won't even know that they're police officers that are constantly walking around to protect you, protect your property, and to be able to be of assistance when needed.
The officer also says they're asking passengers to text any photos or videos of anything suspicious to 7911. Rick?
And Hillary, I understand LAX officials have a strategy to keep frustrated travelers calm.
That's right. I want to introduce you to some pups who are here. They're therapy dogs, and they're here to keep the passengers calm. They all are dressed very festively in their Christmas best. It brings a smile to every passenger's face. They have their own business cards with their photos, and they also hand out postcards to travelers, and this keeps everyone calm. They have these programs in 53 different airports across the U.S., Rick.
I heard that dog say, "Take those ears off me right now." Hillary, did you say you have to put every phone in a separate bin?
He's in the Christmas spirit.
Did you say that each phone has to be in a separate bin?
Anything bigger than a cell phone needs to be in a separate bin. So an iPad, hard drives, all that has to go in separate bins.
Okay, good to know. Thank you, Hillary Vaughn in Los Angeles. President Trump already in Florida for the holiday break. We're live near his resort with a look at his plans for the week ahead. But first, a Fox weather alert. Forecasters say parts of the country could see a white Christmas. Chief Meteorologist Rick Reichmuth is here to tell us all about it.
It's true. We're going to get, I think, almost everybody in New England Sunday night into Monday has a storm in store. And in the short term, has a really messy storm in store. Starting off with some snow. You get a look with the temperatures here. It's cold all across the plains, but nothing that's real horrible. We're going to have much colder air coming in behind this Sunday into Monday. But take a look at this. This warm air is beginning to move towards the northeast. So we have this storm that's starting off as a lot of snow across parts of the northeast. And then eventually it turns into some freezing rain during the overnight hours tonight in towards tomorrow. So take a look at how this storm looks right now. Big rainmaker across parts of the mid-Mississippi River Valley, and behind it snow across parts of West Texas. So the colder air moving in. Right now we've got the snow across parts of New England. But this storm is going to be a big problem maker for us travel-wise. Although that said, across the country, all the airports looking good. I think we'll see some more delays tomorrow. This is a future radar. You see how this storm kind of really develops and brings a lot of rain in across parts of the eastern, really 2/3 of the country. And behind it, a little bit of snow as well. So the colder air mixes in. But in the short term, we've got the snow across much of New England. Some spots maybe 6 to 12 inches, especially across the higher elevations. And then overnight tonight, you see that pink mixing in. By the morning, we have a pretty big ice storm on our hands. So ice falling on top of that snow. Then eventually that all turns into rain as warmer air comes in temporarily before the cold air comes back in behind that. And after that cold air comes back in it, another coastal storm for Christmas Eve into Christmas Day. That right there is a forecast ice totals. You're going to see some spots probably pushing an inch of ice, and that's going to cause major problems for us. As far as Saturday goes, we'll see big delays all across the eastern part of the country. And finally, here for your Christmas Day forecast, things a little bit better. But I think we're talking about kind of that textbook, storybook conditions across much of the Northeast, with snow falling in New England on Christmas Day, making things quite beautiful. We'll continue to track everything right here in the Fox Weather Center right now. Shepard Smith reporting. We'll be right back.
A Fox report now. More headlines from the Fox News deck. All 58 victims in the Las Vegas mass shooting died from gunshot wounds. That's the word from the coroner. According to the autopsy report, no one died from trampling at the country music concert after the gunman opened fire from a hotel room. Before Monday's deadly Amtrak derailment south of Seattle, Washington state officials considered getting rid of the sharp curve where it happened, but apparently decided it was too expensive. That's according to our corporate cousin, the Wall Street Journal. Investigators say the train was traveling 50 miles per hour above the speed limit when it derailed and killed 3 people. And an animal welfare officer crawling out onto a frozen river to save a dog in northeast England. The black lab fell through the ice but managed to keep his head out of the freezing water. Firefighters were ready on the shore with towels to dry him off. And the news continues right after this. President Trump spending Christmas in South Florida. The president leaving Washington after signing the GOP's tax bill into law and heading to his Mar-a-Lago resort on Palm Beach. Air Force One touching down in the Sunshine State a couple of hours ago. Steve Harrigan with the news live in West Palm Beach, not far from Mar-a-Lago. Steve, the president made good time getting to Florida. I don't think there were any delays at the airport. What's on his agenda?
No, 80 degrees and sunny here. He says he's going to do a lot of work down here, but it's hard to imagine not finding some time for golf. There was an enthusiastic crowd out at Palm Beach International Airport. The president mingled with the fans for about 20 minutes, even hoisting one small child up in the air a couple of times, signed a lot of hats and books before moving through a motorcade. One of the key items on his agenda, he tweeted this morning, for 2018 will be infrastructure. He said that we wasted $7 trillion on wars in the Middle East. We have to rebuild America. During the 10-day visit here at the Mar-a-Lago Estate and Private Club, he's also likely to spend a lot of time with family. His wife and younger son already here. His older son, Don Jr., has been seen in town, even deadlifting 375 pounds at a CrossFit gym here. His daughter, Tiffany, also here as well. Rick?
So we see the friendly crowd at the airport, Steve. Any protesters on the route to his estate?
There were no protesters today that we saw, mainly enthusiastic crowds along that motorcade. He's going to be at Mar-a-Lago with no scheduled events, really, but this sort of sleepy area ramps up security quite a bit while the president is here. In addition to the Secret Service, Palm Beach County sheriff's deputies are pitching in, as well as local law enforcement. Some roads are shut down entirely, others shut down just temporarily during the motorcade. And because the estate is on the ocean, you have the Coast Guard out there as well. So the county is reimbursed by the federal government for the money for overtime, things like that. It's been more than $3 million so far this year, Rick.
Steve Harrigan in West Palm Beach. Steve, enjoy the sunshine. Members of the House Intelligence Committee in New York today to interview President Trump's former personal assistant as part of the Russia investigation. That's according to NBC News. It reports committee staffers also interviewed one of the president's former business associates who was involved in talks about a possible Trump Tower being built in Moscow, but that never happened. Lawmakers usually do these interviews in secure rooms at the U.S. Capitol. Our corporate cousin, the Wall Street Journal, reports the committee moved the sessions to New York because one witness's lawyer is injured. The president has said, of course, that there was no collusion with Russia. So let's bring in our political panel. Sarah Lenti is a Republican strategist, former director at the National Security Council under Condoleezza Rice, and former advisor to Mitt Romney. And Capri Cafaro is the former Ohio Senate Democratic leader and now an executive in residence at American University School of Public Affairs. And I am a graduate of American University, so
fantastic.
Let's just make sure we have full disclosure on that. Sarah, critics are suggesting that the Republicans are trying to rush this probe to conclusion. Why would they do that?
They are. Well, critics are going to say that, and it does seem like the House Republicans are on a fast track to try to end this investigation. It's clear that yesterday, Congress fled D.C. They got the tax bill signed, they got the stopgap measure in place to keep the government funded, and they cut out of D.C. And today we know they're in New York continuing the investigation. We also heard today, though, however, that the House Intelligence Committee is going to expand the investigation into Corey Lewandowski and Steve Bannon. So while they may be trying to rush the investigation, it's going to go on well into January.
Sarah, does it matter that the interviews aren't in Washington?
It's different and it's circumspect, but at the end of the day, they have their staffers there and a handful of lawmakers. And if they're getting the information that they need, I think it's okay.
Let's hope there are no leaks, though. I mean, if you're not doing it in a secure area, you certainly, I think, you have the risk of, people getting information that may not necessarily be privy to them and put that into the public purview.
Capri, are they trying? Do you think the Republicans are trying to rush this through, to get it over with as quickly as possible?
I think that it would be, smart for them to do. I mean, obviously, they are trying to, move this along. And it's my understanding that it was GOP members that actually requested Corey Lewandowski and Steve Bannon to come and testify in front of the Intelligence Committee. So, the quicker this whole thing can get done, the quicker Congress, Democrats and Republicans alike, can get back to the business of governing. But I hope that in their desire to get this done quickly, that corners aren't cut and it's a thorough investigation.
Sarah, we had reporting earlier this hour about the Republicans being concerned about how all of this might affect the midterm elections. What's your sense?
The midterms elections are going to be a problem. We know that congressional job approval rating right now is at 12 to 14%, depending on what poll you're looking at. Look, it's in the Republicans' best interest to move these investigations forward so that they can get some more legislative wins on the board in order to protect their seats at home. So, yes, they're in trouble, and I think everyone's fully aware of that. It's going to be quite a year.
Capri, are you seeing signs that this Russia probe is hurting the president?
I think that publicly, it certainly is never good news, and it's a distraction, from his agenda. Anytime that anyone is talking about Russia, the Russia investigation, collusion, it takes the focus away from any kind of legislative agenda and puts it on something that obviously is summarily negative. Whether it's true or not, it's obviously perception is reality, and it's obviously negative. So if this continues to be at the forefront of media coverage and of the congressional agenda, things like infrastructure, if they want to try to make a bipartisan win, for example, may be overshadowed by the Russia investigation going forward into 2018, which certainly is not helpful. For President Trump, but maybe in a weird way might be helpful for congressional Republicans who want to appear fair and maybe want to distance themselves.
I'm sure both of you have seen this ongoing story that's getting a lot of play on a lot of media outlets, rumors that the Trump team is considering firing Mueller. And the White House adamantly denies this. John Roberts says definitively it's not happening, that the legal team has an excellent, very professional, cooperative relationship with Mueller and his team, and calls these phony allegations. And yet we continue to hear reports on this, that the president might be firing Mueller. We keep hearing about this. Sarah, let's start with you. Why?
Yeah, well, Sarah Huckabee Sanders was on America's Newsroom yesterday, and she was unambiguous in saying no, that Mueller is not going to be fired. Trump's legal team today said that no, Mueller's not going to be fired. I think this is just spin because it creates for controversy, and it would not bode well if the president did this and fired Mueller. But we're hearing no from the president and his sources. So I think it's just spin.
Capri, why would the Democrats push this line if it's not true?
Well, I mean, I for one will take President Trump at his word, and until and unless he changes his mind and makes a different decision. I think that the Democrats are so fixated on the issue of the potential of saying, okay, President Trump is doing something to obstruct justice, and therefore let's latch on to impeachment proceedings. I would caution my fellow Democrats that if we go down this rabbit hole, we'll have to see what happens and if he would ever fire Mueller, which he's saying he's not. But if we're so fixated on this, political gamesmanship, I think that the American public is going to get more and more frustrated as we continue to cry wolf and don't focus on a legislative agenda showing what to the American public what the Democratic Party stands for and how we intend on helping the American people rather than just playing partisan politics in Washington.
Sarah, the president's celebrating a legislative victory today with the signing of that tax bill. A pretty good way to end the year, I would think, for him.
It's a wonderful way to end the year. However, the Congress is going to come back, and they just put that stopgap measure in place to keep the government funded. And on January 19th, the battle is going to begin again over DACA, over CHIP, over defense spending. So it's the holiday is only so long, and then there's real work to be done. And the budget's going to have to come to a resolution, and so they have a lot of work ahead of them.
Can he build on this, Capri? Do you think?
On the momentum of tax reform?
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, I think that there, it's one very specific issue where, Republicans and the White House collectively said, this is one of these promises that we made to the American people in the election, and they were able to deliver on this promise. DACA is different. CHIP is different. Keeping the doors open to with the continuing resolution after the 19th of January. All of this is, I think, you're going to have to take them one by one. And I don't necessarily think that you're going to be able to translate that momentum, because even inside the Republican Party, you have differences of opinion on a number of these issues coming up. So there will be, dissent amongst the ranks inside the Republican caucus, I think very similarly to what we saw during the Obamacare debate.
Capri, Sarah, we appreciate your time on this Friday before the holiday. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Happy
all the
holidays.
best. So get ready for Super Saturday. One survey predicting tomorrow will be the biggest shopping day of the year. Did you get your shopping done yet? We're going to see how things are shaping up at one mall coming up next.